शाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारणम्। Hare Krishna. Welcome to all of you to today's episode of Mahabharata. A quick recap of the last episode. In the last episode we saw how Yudhishthira Maharaj successfully conducted the Rajasuya Yajna, and in the course of conducting the Rajasuya Yajna, Krishna was elected by all the dignitaries who were present to receive the Agra Puja, the first worship offered to the most eminent personality in that assembly. This was objected to by Shishupala, who was later, because of his offences, he was liberated by Lord Krishna's Sudarshana Chakra. And we also saw how Yudhishthira Maharaj took his Avabrata Snana, the ceremonial bath in the Yamunaji, and there was a lot of gaiety, lot of festivity, there was a lot of playful exchanges between all the women folk and the men folk, and eventually everything concluded very auspiciously, and all the sages, all the demigods, all the various Brahmanas, Vaishyas, Sudras who had come to attend, all of them left very happily. And everyone was satisfied completely with all the arrangements, all the hospitality, and the way the Rajasuya Yajna was conducted. Everyone was satisfied except for one person. Who was that one person? We will know about that today. Actually, we should understand that Yudhishthira Maharaj is a very great soul, a highly elevated, pure devotee, a liberated soul. Because Yudhishthira Maharaj was such a great devotee of Lord Krishna, he was of very congenial disposition to everyone. And because of his loving way of dealing with people and his complete lack of pride, his humility, endeared himself to everyone. Generally, we see that when a person becomes very opulent, he becomes very powerful, the person naturally there is a certain arrogance that comes about in him. But Yudhishthira Maharaj was totally untouched by such things. And therefore, anybody who would come in touch with him would get automatically drawn towards him. And nobody could harbor any sort of enmity towards Yudhishthira Maharaj in their heart. And so therefore, Yudhishthira Maharaj was called Ajata Shatru, meaning the person who would never make anybody inimical towards him. By his behavior, by his actions, by his words, in any manner, Yudhishthira Maharaj, nobody could find fault in Yudhishthira Maharaj's dealings. And so therefore, when all the sages and devatas and all the other kings, everybody went back to their respective places, everyone was glorifying Yudhishthira Maharaj, and they were remembering and they were conversing amongst themselves the different aspects of the opulent Rajasuya Yajna which was performed. And even though they repeatedly spoke and remembered about this Rajasuya Yajna, none of them could feel satiated. They only felt greater bliss every time they discussed about the Rajasuya Yajna amongst themselves. Actually, the Rajasuya Yajna is a very, very it is practically like an ocean of opulence, and it is very difficult for any normal person to be able to conduct that Rajasuya Yajna. But Yudhishthira Maharaj, because of his unflinching devotion to Lord Krishna, he very easily crossed over that unsurpassable ocean of opulences which was the Rajasuya Yajna. Because of his devotion to Lord Krishna, Yudhishthira Maharaj was able to satisfy his desires. Generally, we see everybody has some dream or the other in life, something that everybody wants to achieve very badly in life. It is their burning desire to achieve some particular object or any such thing in their life. And majority of the people, they never get to fulfill their dreams. A few people do get to fulfill their dreams, but then nobody can get fully satisfied in fulfilling their dreams. That's the nature of this material world. In fact, Srila Prabhupada used to give a wonderful example. Prabhupada used to say that all the happiness that is there in this material world of achieving our dreams is like sweet rice. Sweet rice is a very palatable, very sweet dish which everybody likes to eat. Now, suppose somebody gives you a bowl of sweet rice, and when you scoop it out with a spoon and put it into your mouth, so sweet, so nice. And when you start chewing that sweet rice, suddenly you find grains of sand in that. What will happen? Your whole joy will be spoiled. In a similar manner, in this material world, all the happiness, all the joy that we get out of fulfilling our desires, out of fulfilling our aspirations, out of fulfilling our dreams, are like the sweet dish, are like the sweet rice. And no matter how successful we become in achieving our goals, always such happiness will be mixed with grains of sand of distress. Some sort of distress, some sort of unhappiness, some sort of dissatisfaction, some sort of frustration, somewhere something will be lacking. That's the nature of this material world. We all have experienced it. But then Yudhishthira Maharaj, because of his devotion to Krishna, what happened? He could fulfill his desire to the fullest extent without any trace of any sort of distress or any lacking. His desire was completely fulfilled in conducting the Rajasuya Yajna. Simply because Yudhishthira Maharaj was a great devotee of Krishna. The nature of such great devotees of Krishna is, as it is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Sarva Bhuteshu Yaha Pashyed Bhagavad Bhavamatmanaha Bhutani Bhagavat Atmani Yesha Bhagavatottamaha. The Bhagavatottama, the topmost devotee of Krishna, is a person. The characteristic of such a topmost devotee of Krishna is such that devotee, when he looks at any living entity, he sees Krishna, the Paramatma, being present in the heart of that living entity, and he sees every living entity as part and parcel, Amsha of Krishna. And not only that, everywhere he turns, whatever he sees Krishna is the source of that object. So, he sees Krishna as the cause of all causes. Anything that he sees it as an energy of Krishna, as Krishna being the source of that object. And he sees every living entity as part and parcel of Krishna. And therefore, such a topmost devotee of Krishna never distinguishes, never discriminates between one person and another. He does not discriminate, this is my enemy, this is my friend, and such things. So Yudhishthira Maharaj was actually on that platform. If we look at Srila Prabhupada's life, Srila Prabhupada also demonstrated this kind of non-discrimination between various people. Generally, if we look at this material world, there are a lot of conflicts that exist. The Hindus are fighting against the Muslims. The Hindus are fighting against the Christians. In the Muslims, the Shias are fighting against the Sunnis. Then you have Indians pitted against the Pakistanis, and in Afghanistan we have ISIS pitted against the Taliban, and the United States is pitted against the Chinese. So like this we see there is so much conflict between individuals, between societies, between communities, between nations, on the basis of religion, caste, color. Within the United States we have the whites and the blacks who are always under conflict. So on the basis of religion, caste, color, gender, we have all sorts of women's liberation movement, because the women have been discriminated against by the men. So based on gender, based on color, based on religion, based on nationality, so much conflicts happen within this world that we see. But if you look at Prabhupada went all over the world. Prabhupada went to Russia, Prabhupada went to Iran, Prabhupada went to America, Prabhupada went to Europe, Prabhupada went to Australia. Practically almost every part of the world Prabhupada went to, irrespective of their nationality, their color, their gender, their religion. Prabhupada gave the message of Bhagavad Gita to everyone. And whoever it was, whether it was Christians, whether it was Jews, whether it was Muslims, whether it was Hindus, Prabhupada accepted all of them who wanted to know about Krishna, and Prabhupada taught all of them without any discrimination about the message of the Bhagavad Gita. So Prabhupada's disciples, there were blacks, there were whites, there were people of different colors, there were Indians, there were Africans, there were Muslims, there were Christians, there were Jews. All sorts of people became disciples of Prabhupada. And even today, Prabhupada continues to shower his grace and compassion upon all sorts of people. So we can see such kind of people exist who are completely beyond all sorts of bodily discriminations. They only see everyone as a pure spirit soul, part and parcel of Krishna. So, like Srila Prabhupada, Yudhishthira Maharaj was also on that platform, and he also did not discriminate. And that is why during the Rajasuya Yajna, even though Duryodhana had tried to murder the Pandavas by putting them into that house of shellac and setting it on fire, still Yudhishthira Maharaj handed over the entire treasury to Duryodhana to keep account of all the expenses and income during the Rajasuya Yajna. We can see the magnanimity of Yudhishthira Maharaj. So, because of Yudhishthira Maharaj lack of discrimination between who is friend, who is enemy, and who I am superior, he is subordinate, Yudhishthira Maharaj had none of these considerations, and so therefore he was called Ajata Shatru. And therefore, when all the Devatas, Rishis, everybody came and attended the Rajasuya Yajna and they went back, they were all so happy, so blissful, and they could not find any satiation in continuing to describe about the events which happened in the Rajasuya Yajna, except for, as we spoke about, one person who was Duryodhana. Why? Because Duryodhana, right from his youth, from his young childhood, he had been always harboring envy towards the Pandavas. He knew always the Pandavas were superior to him in all kinds of, in their qualities, in their abilities, in their skill, in their talent, in their popularity. In every manner the Pandavas exceeded the Duryodhana. And so Duryodhana always harbored that envy towards the Pandavas. Somehow when the Pandavas grew up, actually the Pandavas were supposed to sit on the throne of Hastinapura. And Duryodhana's greatest envy was that Hastinapura would not legally be his, and Yudhishthira had the first claim on that throne. But somehow when the Pandavas grew up, Dhritarashtra, by his duplicity, instead of handing over the Hastinapura throne to the Pandavas, when the Pandavas had grown up and asked him for the kingdom, he gave them Indraprastha, which was actually just a barren piece of land. It was just some forest, this one, and some barren piece of land in between. And there was no habitation, there was practically no city, no kingdom, nothing. Pandavas were the only people in that place. So, when the Pandavas were given Indraprastha, Duryodhana had felt very happy. Now the Pandavas have been given an uninhabited place, and they have been given a God-forsaken place. They have been sent away there. Now I can enjoy the opulence of Hastinapura. That was Duryodhana's thinking. But when Duryodhana came for the Rajasuya Yajna, the kind of opulence that he saw in the Rajasuya Yajna, great rishis, sages, all the kings from all over the world, even the biggest Vaishyas of that time. Not only that, even Devatas like Brahma and Shiva personally came down and attended the Rajasuya Yajna. So the kind of opulence when Duryodhana saw, his envy again, it started burning forth. It again got sparked, and again that fire of envy started burning in his heart. And when Duryodhana saw the Pandavas' palace which had been built by Mayadanava, his envy exploded forward. And then what happened was, one more thing that happened was, after the Rajasuya Yajna, Duryodhana with his brothers once came to the palace of the Pandavas. When he entered the palace, Duryodhana by his nature was a short-tempered guy, and he was used to being very nasty. When he entered the palace, the doorkeepers, some exchange happened. Immediately he snapped at them and started firing them, scolding them and all that. And in his usual nasty mood, he entered the palace. Now that palace that Mayadanava had constructed, he had designed it in such a way that it had many visual illusions incorporated into the architecture. Because of that, some places where the marble and other things would be laid, they would be polished in such a way that it would look like there is water there and it is reflecting the people's images. But actually there would be no water there, it would be just a plain surface. And then at other places, he would build water bodies in such a way that you could not make out that there is water there, unless of course you are aware of the layout of the place. So Duryodhana, very haughtily, he entered this palace and started walking in. And when he came across a place where it looked like there was water, he was carefully avoiding it and trying to step across it. And when he kept his foot, he realized there is no water there. And then at another place when he came, now when he was going through this palace, what he also saw, that the palace was filled with all the queens of Krishna. Krishna had come with all the 16,108 queens from Dwarka to attend the Rajasuya Yajna. And upon Yudhishthira Maharaj's request, he was staying back with all of them in that palace, even after the Rajasuya Yajna ended. So he saw all these beautiful queens walking around, they're laughing, their ankle bells tinkling, their, the kind of jewelry they were wearing, the beautiful sarees, silk sarees that they were wearing, and their beauty, indescribable beauty, which surpassed even that of the Apsaras in the heavenly kingdoms. When he saw that, Duryodhana's envy increased even more. The opulence of the Pandavas when he was witnessing this. And so like this, he went further into the palace, and he came to a place where he saw Yudhishthira Maharaj is seated on a golden throne. Imagine a throne made of pure gold. That was the opulence of Yudhishthira Maharaj. When the Pandavas were sent away from Hastinapura to Indraprastha, they started with practically nothing. But in no time, they had built a kingdom of such opulence that Yudhishthira Maharaj was sitting on a throne made of pure gold. Next to him, Lord Krishna was seated, and his other 4 brothers were also seated around him, and they were looking like great devatas sitting there, brightly effulgent and beautiful. And Duryodhana also saw right there in that assembly was Draupadi, along with many maid servants, and looking very effulgent and beautiful, and very peacefully serving her husbands, the Pancha Pandavas. And this image in front of him what happened? It only served to further add fuel to the fire of envy burning in Duryodhana's heart. Because right from the time of the Swayamvara of Draupadi, Duryodhana had got attracted to Draupadi, and he had always nourished lusty desires towards her. He wanted to enjoy her illicitly. So now when he saw Draupadi so beautiful and serving so peacefully her husbands, his envy even more, it burnt forth with greater vigor. And so this Duryodhana, he stepped forward into that assembly where the Pandavas were happily sitting and discussing something with Krishna. And when he stepped into that assembly, he assumed that it was a nice, marble place, and he stepped into that place. Actually, that was a water body which had been created by Mayadanava, and because of the optical illusion created by that, Duryodhana could not make out that it was a water body. Very confidently he kept his foot inside and fell into the water, and he completely got drenched. And when he foolishly fell into the water and made a fool of himself like this, all the women folk who were there, Draupadi and all the other queens of Krishna and various maidservants, they all started laughing. And when they started laughing, Duryodhana saw this. He saw how, when Yudhishthira Maharaj saw this, when he saw how Duryodhana had fallen into the water, and he was so embarrassed, and all the women folk are laughing at him, Yudhishthira Maharaj tried to restrain them. He tried to stop them because he felt empathetic towards Duryodhana. But Krishna was seated right there, and Krishna indicated to Yudhishthira, no, let them laugh, no problem, don't restrain anyone. So being instructed by Krishna, Yudhishthira Maharaj kept quiet. Now Duryodhana got out of the water and he was seething with anger. But then he could not say anything because it was his own mistake. He had fallen into the water. So he did not say anything, he did not complain, he did not talk to anyone. He just bowed his head and walked out of the palace. So Yudhishthira Maharaj, when he saw this, he understood, oh, now unnecessarily Duryodhana has become angry at us, and we could have avoided it. After all, poor fellow, he did not realize it was water and fell into it. Why we should have laughed at it? Like that Yudhishthira Maharaj was thinking, but Krishna was silent. Krishna neither spoke in favor of Duryodhana nor against him. He just kept silent. And thus the dice was cast. The ball was set rolling for the Kurukshetra war. The seeds of Kurukshetra war were sown in the Rajasuya Yajna, followed by the incident at the palace of the Pandavas. And in this manner, the Rajasuya Yajna became the tipping point, became the turning point in that history of Mahabharata, where it became evident that Duryodhana is going to harbor great enmity towards the Pandavas. Now, after this incident, once Lord Krishna was sitting in the palace along with the Pandavas, and he was paring some fruits, he was cutting some fruits with a small knife. And it so happened, while Krishna was cutting the fruit, the knife nicked Krishna's finger, and suddenly blood started coming. Actually, Krishna's body is completely transcendental. No material object can touch Krishna. And Krishna's body is completely Satchidananda. It is completely full, it is made up of the substance of bliss, eternity and knowledge. So, Krishna's body is not like our body, consisting of skin, flesh, blood, bone and all these kind of things. So, how did the blood come out of Krishna's finger? It is not possible. But sometimes Krishna exhibits such symptoms of blood coming out of his body in order to execute some leela of his, some pastime of his, in order to create a situation where his devotees' devotion for him increases. And this we will see even later during the time when the Kurukshetra war was going on also. Of course, we will speak about it at that time. So, in this instance, Krishna exhibited his Yogamaya power, his spiritual potency. By his spiritual potency exhibited as if blood was started coming out of his finger, just to see the reaction of his devotees. Draupadi happened to be standing right there, and the moment she saw Krishna's finger has been cut and blood has started coming out, she said, "Oh, Krishna's finger is bleeding. Now what to do?" She was looking around how to bandage Krishna's finger. She didn't get anything. She immediately took her sari. She tore a portion of her sari and then tied it around Krishna's finger very carefully, out of great concern, out of great anxiety. Krishna saw this and he looked at Draupadi and he said, "My dear lady, you have given me a piece of your sari and you have tied my finger. I will remember this. I will remember this." Those were the words of Krishna. So now, how did Krishna repay the debt to Draupadi? And what happened to the great envy and anger which was seething with Duryodhana, which definitely was not going to be contained? It had to come out in some way or the other. Please join us in our upcoming sessions of the Mahabharata to know about this. Thank you for joining us today. Hare Krishna. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol.